The creation story, as paraphrased by Reverend Kelly. In the beginning, before God created any of this, there was just chaos, moving and shifting, messy and possible. And God brooded over all of that mess, considering options. And the first thing God decided to create was light. God called it by name, "Let there be light." And God saw that it was good. God could see that there was a need for some organization. So God created the sky to hold the earth together. And God pulled the waters together to make oceans and lakes and rivers and dry land too, recognizing that having different kinds of places was better than one big sameness. And God sprinkled some life into all of it. That's good, God said. And God thought, maybe we should have some markers of time too, so things are not always the same. So God made the sun to rise and set and mark the days, and the moon to mark the months, and the stars for sparkle. And God looked over all of it and thought, we need more movement. So God created beautiful and graceful beings that swam through the water and flew through the air. God said, you will be fruitful. Looking over the land, God thought to add some creatures that lived there too. All kinds of walking, running, and slithering beings, huge and tiny, all colors and shapes. Now we're getting there, God said. You can make more of you too. And we know that the fish and the birds and the animals might tell the story in a different order. But since we're people, we tell it this way. God looked over all the other creatures and saw a gap in the shape of us. So God created people diverse and fabulous, so different from each other with the gift of reflecting, organizing, and co-creating. All this, God said, it's for you. Enjoy it. Notice it. Sing about it. And God looked out at everything and saw that it was very, very good.
Blessed are the queer.
You have heard it said that queer love distorts the proper categories
of who counts as a man and what men are allowed to do, and who counts as a woman and what women are supposed to have done to them,
and who counts as a person and who counts as a partner.
But I say to you, what is queer than the incarnation, disrupting the divide between the human realm and the divine?
Not dissolving the difference between the two, but eliminating the distance and turning limitations into limitless love.
And boundaries into opportunities, to make an unseen God tangible.
In a rainbow of genders and bodies and partners and positions.
You have heard it said that male-bodied visitors are more valuable than female-bodied children.
And a man's desire to penetrate or be penetrated by another is worse than a man offering his daughters to the power lust of an angry mob.
But I say to you,
no one has ever seen God, and of course they haven't seen in a world like this.
But when you love one another,
when you and you and you and you love yourself and love each other,
I say to you that God's love, that God who is love, is revealed, is manifest, is experienced, is present in a way that would otherwise be invisible.
In a way that would otherwise be impossible.
For we are the image of a queer God who is at the same time powerful beyond comprehension and vulnerable beyond all reason.
And you've heard it said that sex is an expression of power, and marriage is a property contract, and affection is a means for procreation.
What a sad, small vision to see love as so limited.
You have heard it said that you are an abomination.
But I say to you
that power-hungry people may not have the stomach for love beyond hierarchy.
And I say to you.
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 Blessed are the queer.
Happy Pride, Church. It is my honor and my delight to be the first one in the series of queer preachers, LGBTQ preachers, featured all June this year. And because I was first, I got to pick my scripture reading first, before any of the other preachers. So I thought about what I wanted to say. What was the passage that might most deeply affirm and support LGBTQ people, queer love and relationships? The whole Bible in my hands. I did a little bit of thinking. And I thought, well, there's Ruth and Naomi, that's a classic. Or there's David and Jonathan. Or there are passages about God knowing us in our mother's womb. Or there are passages about, other kinds of relationships, marriages, and how to be in them. And there's a whole genre of preaching against text, to go through the various texts that people sometimes use against queer relationships, to pick them apart and to find where in them is the room that God promises for all of us to thrive. But because I'm first, and I got to choose first, I got to choose my favorite. The piece of the Bible that to me speaks most deeply to God affirming me as a queer person in the world and affirming all of the wide diversity of human gender and sexuality. And that is the first creation story in Scripture, read today so beautifully by Jackie, or at least read my paraphrase so beautifully by Jackie. I got to cheat a little because it's a long story, so I compressed it a little bit, and I highlighted some of the things that I really wanted you to hear. And I think, at its heart, this is a story about God loving things to be different from each other. In the beginning, everything was kind of all jumbled up together, and it was all just one big thing. A thing of chaos and movement and possibility, but one kind of thing. And the first thing God does is say, how about two kinds of things? How about light and darkness? And as soon as God did that, God said, I like it. That is good. Let's have more. And God started separating and making things different from each other. Separating the sky from the earth, separating the waters from the land, separating time so that things could change, separating days from each other and months and years, and creating movement and difference. At the core of this story for me is God's affirmation that different is better than the same. And as we have come to terms over human history, over and over sometimes, with the diversity of human gender and sexuality, it kind of goes like that. The first thing that happens is we say, maybe there are two kinds of things instead of one. Maybe there is straight and gay. And then we say, well, maybe there are other kinds of things. Maybe being a lesbian is different than being a gay man. Maybe people could be bisexual. Maybe some people can identify not as a woman or a man, but as something else, something in between, or both, or neither. Maybe it can change over time, from day to day, or month to month, or year to year. Maybe some people could be pansexual and some people could be asexual. Maybe different is better than the same. And I believe that every time we come to a new understanding like that, every time we come up with a new word to try to describe one more nuance of how we can be different from each other, I believe God says, that's good. I like it. After all, when God started creating animals, beings that could multiply, God said to them, I like you so much that you can make more of yourselves. And God said to people the same, I like you so much that you can participate in this creative project. I like you so much that you can change. I like you so much that you can evolve. You can become. You can create. You, especially people, can define and articulate and reflect and make art and do science and find out more and more. And everything we find out and every piece of knowledge and every piece of identification, I think God receives as a compliment. As we say, look, a little more difference even. And God, I think, says, that's good. I like it. You can make more of you. People sometimes, over Christian history, with its failings and its foibles, have gotten a little bit stuck on the way the traditional telling of this creation story describes God saying to people and animals, you can be fruitful. Be fruitful and multiply. And when I was first coming out, there was a little question about that, whether gay people, perhaps like me, were running afoul of God's rules and getting something wrong because of the lack of very literal fruitfulness in our relationships. Now, setting aside all of the problems with making that a criteria, namely that people who are infertile of any sexuality or gender would also be denied the right to be married, and that elderly folks who are past their reproductive years also would not be allowed to be married, and, setting aside all of that, it's such a narrow idea of what fruitfulness can mean. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. When I was first coming out, I went to talk with the priest of my childhood Catholic church about being gay. I think there had been some concerns, and I was pretty nervous about the conversation, but I thought, I better just hear him out, and then I'll know where I stand. In a way, I think I was sort of expecting. In fact, I might have even been hoping for him to say, nope, this doesn't work for us. Fruitfulness is the line in the sand. You'll need to find a new home. But instead, what he said to me was, well, it's not just a free-for-all. But St. Augustine gave us some criteria for a sacred and God-filled relationship that might be helpful to you. He said, Augustine described a sacred and God-filled relationship as having 3 characteristics: that it would be faithful, that it would be fruitful, and that it would be permanent. Now, I think I have some foibles around the word permanent, as much as I do hope and pray and work towards my own marriage being permanent. I know that people change and that God allows and rejoices in people changing, and so things do change sometimes. But faithful, I think, is a good criteria, both in the question that we are upholding and challenging and supporting each other's faith, and that we are honest and transparent with each other, that we're faithful to the relationship, that we're not sneaking around behind this, but the back of it, but that we're participating in it wholeheartedly. And then we get to that tricky word, fruitfulness from our scripture text. And I thought we were going to get stuck there, and the priest at that church said, fruitfulness can mean any number of things. He said, what you need to think about is, does your relationship bear fruit for the wider community? And so Cheryl and I wrote that into our marriage vows, promising to each other and to the people who came, and to all of you, our vow that our relationship would bear fruit for you, for the world, for justice, for God's coming kingdom. And we asked our community to make promises back to us, to help us be faithful and to receive the fruits of our marriage, whatever they might be. Fruitfulness can be so many things. and God's delight in the various fruits of our relationships, of our beautiful, incredible, diverse ways of loving and expressing ourselves and each other in the world. I think that our beautiful queer community is bigger and more beautiful and more diverse than God could have even imagined in this creation story. And I think that every day, when we show up, when we hold our identities out to God, when we call our words out, when we participate in community, when we learn each other's pronouns, when we celebrate and challenge and uplift and support each other's love in all the different ways that those take, God looks at us, maybe even with a tear in her eyes, and says, that is good. You are doing it. To me, that's what pride is all about. Pride is about recognizing what God is doing, what God is continuing to make, and what we are making alongside them. Our work as co-creators, and as identifiers, and as poets and artists, as speakers and articulators and recognizers and appreciators, is to hold things back out to God, to hold them up in our own precious small hands, ourselves and our loves and our hearts, as diverse and surprising as they are, as changing as they continue to be, to hold them out to each other and to God with courage and with joy, so that with God, the rest of us can look at them and say to each other, that's good. That's so good. Your own heart, your own love, your own way of being, gay or straight or pansexual or bisexual or asexual, male or female or agender or non-binary or genderqueer or gender fluid, whatever your pronouns are, whatever configuration your relationships take, whatever fruits your life and your love bears out for the world, it's all part of the work. It's all precious. It's all part of God's joy and of our collective joy together. Thanks be to God, and happy Pride.